Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast. Today you're joining us as we plunge into a real-life spy story. It's honestly more gripping than any thriller.
It really is.
A chilling account that unfolded right in the heart of London back in 2006. The poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. Forget the fiction for a moment. This is a true tale involving radioactive poison, international shadows, and a final accusation that just echoed around the world.
It truly is one of those cases where reality it surpasses even the wildest imaginations. We're going to explore the details of this extraordinary event.
Yeah.
Drawing on the available information so you can understand exactly what happened and, importantly, why it continues to be relevant today.
Okay, so let's start with the central figure, Alexander Litvinenko. He wasn't just anyone, right? He was a former insider.
Yeah, absolutely. An officer of the Russian Federal Security Service, the FSB.
And before that, the KGB.
Infamous. The very same. But then, in the year 2000, he made a pretty dramatic break, fled to the UK.
And became a really outspoken critic of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. You can imagine the kind of tensions that would create.
Oh, absolutely. Someone with his background, privy to all sorts of sensitive information and then turning into a public adversary, he'd undoubtedly be viewed as a significant threat.
By the very organization he once served.
Exactly. His defection wasn't just a personal choice. It instantly had these big geopolitical implications.
And his opposition wasn't just, like, talk. While he was in exile, Litvinenko actively collaborated with British and Spanish intelligence agencies.
Giving them information.
Yeah, he was providing them with info about the Russian mafia operating in Europe and, crucially, their alleged links back to the Russian government. This was high-stakes stuff.
You can see how it might have put him in considerable danger.
Definitely.
Indeed. The intelligence he shared would have been, invaluable, offering a rare glimpse into the inner workings of these clandestine networks.
By cooperating with Western agencies, he was directly challenging the interests of some very powerful people.
Powerful entities, for sure.
Okay, now let's focus on a pivotal date, November 1st, 2006. This is the day everything just shifted.
Right.
Litvinenko had a couple of really crucial meetings in London. First, he met with two former Russian KGB officers, Andrey Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun,
Okay.
at the Pine Bar of the Millennium Hotel. Then later that day, he had lunch with an Italian officer, Mario Scaramella.
And this lunch is particularly interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because they discussed alleged KGB connections to Romano Prodi, and Scaramella even gave Litvinenko some papers.
Papers related to what?
Related to the murder of the journalist Anna Politkovskaya, another very vocal critic of the Kremlin who had been killed recently. So you can see the atmosphere around him was charged.
It's important for listeners to understand the context of these meetings, Litvinenko was actively involved in investigating and exposing what he believed to be serious wrongdoings. So his interactions that day, especially with people who had ties to Russian intelligence, they become particularly significant in light of what happened next.
And what happened next was sudden and really severe illness. That very evening, November 1st, Litvinenko began experiencing violent vomiting.
Awful.
And bloody diarrhea. This wasn't a gradual sickness. It hit him rapidly and intensely.
Which led to his hospitalization just 2 days later, right? November 3rd.
Exactly. You can imagine the alarm bells going off.
The abrupt onset and the nature of his symptoms immediately suggested to the doctors that this was, more than just a common ailment.
Right. Like, food poisoning can be bad, but...
But the severity and the specific characteristics here pointed towards something far more sinister.
Initially, the doctors were, understandably perplexed. They considered typical gastroenteritis. But his condition just kept getting worse in a very unusual way. Then, because of some symptoms like hair loss, they started exploring the possibility of thallium poisoning.
Thallium. That's a heavy metal, highly toxic.
Yeah.
And the suspicion of thallium is logical in hindsight, given some of those initial indicators. However, as the medical team meticulously monitored his case, certain elements just didn't quite align with the typical presentation of thallium poisoning.
Which highlights the complex diagnostic puzzle they were facing in those early stages.
Absolutely, a real medical mystery.
Now, here's where the story takes a truly fascinating, almost unbelievable turn. It was tests conducted at the UK's Atomic Weapons Establishment.
AWE, a specialized government facility for nuclear research.
Exactly. That ultimately revealed the truth. They were analyzing his samples for radioactive substances using a technique called gamma spectroscopy.
Which basically identifies radioactive materials by analyzing the energy of the radiation they emit.
Right, and initially the results weren't conclusive, but a very perceptive scientist noticed something.
What was it?
A faint but distinct spike in the gamma ray readings at a very specific energy level.
Wow. That was a pivotal moment in the investigation then.
Totally.
The fact that it required the expertise of scientists at such a specialized institution just underscores the extraordinary nature of the poison used.
Yeah, this wasn't some common toxin you'd detect in standard hospital screening.
Not at all.
And get this, the scientist who spotted that tiny spike, apparently they had knowledge dating back to Britain's early atomic bomb programs decades ago.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, they just happened to overhear a discussion about this subtle signal and recognized it, the unique signature of the radioactive decay of polonium-210.
That is incredible. Talk about a piece of historical knowledge playing a crucial role in a modern-day mystery.
Isn't it?
That element of historical expertise intersecting with a contemporary crime is truly remarkable. It's like finding a single, almost forgotten clue that just unlocks the entire puzzle.
It really is. And it speaks to the enduring legacy of nuclear research, too.
Definitely.
Okay, so polonium-210 itself, it's quite remarkable and incredibly deadly. It's a radioactive isotope.
Meaning its nucleus is unstable, emits radiation.
Right, and unlike some other radioactive materials, it primarily emits alpha particles.
Now, alpha particles are relatively large. They don't travel very far.
And crucially for this story, they're difficult to detect with standard Geiger counters, which explains why the initial radiation scans at the hospital came back negative.
But, and this is the vital point, alpha emitters are exceptionally dangerous if they are ingested or inhaled, because then they come into direct contact with your internal tissues.
Precisely. Once inside the body, these alpha particles act like microscopic projectiles, causing significant and localized cellular damage.
And the fact that it's so difficult to detect externally made it a particularly insidious choice for a poison. Really nasty stuff.
Tragically, Alexander Litvinenko's condition continued to worsen. In his final days, before his death on November 23rd, he issued this powerful, very public statement from his hospital bed.
I remember seeing that.
He directly accused President Putin of personally ordering his assassination.
A huge accusation.
His death was horrific. It was the first confirmed fatality from acute radiation syndrome caused specifically by polonium-210.
And his accusation, delivered with such gravity, reaching a global audience, it immediately amplified the international implications of this event.
Oh, massively.
It wasn't just a personal tragedy anymore. It became a major political flashpoint.
And the reaction was immediate and widespread. Litvinenko's allegations, coupled with the, unprecedented use of radioactive poisoning right in the middle of London.
Yeah.
It dominated global news. It triggered significant diplomatic tensions between the UK and Russia. It was an event unlike any other.
The deployment of a radioactive isotope as a murder weapon in a major European capital was just deeply disturbing. It challenged established norms of international conduct and raised serious questions about state-sponsored violence.
Okay, let's move forward then. The aftermath, the investigation, and this chilling trail of deadly polonium.
Right.
British authorities, as you can imagine, launched an extensive investigation. They meticulously traced the polonium-210 back.
Where did they find it?
To a specific teapot in the Pine Bar of the Millennium Hotel. That's where Litvinenko had drunk green tea with Lugovoy and Kovtun on that fateful November 1st.
Wow, the teapot itself.
Yeah. So if you're picturing a spy novel, this is the kind of detail that feels almost too dramatic to be real, isn't it?
The identification of the contaminated teapot was obviously a critical breakthrough for the investigators. It pinpointed not only the location, but also the likely method of administering the poison.
But the investigation revealed an even wider scope of contamination.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Traces of polonium were found at over 40 different locations across London.
40?
Yeah, this wasn't isolated to the hotel bar. The investigation uncovered evidence suggesting multiple attempts to poison Litvinenko, not just the successful one on November 1st.
Multiple attempts.
They found traces dating back to October 16th and 25th, indicating that Lugovoy and Kovtun had been in London and had interacted with Litvinenko on those earlier occasions as well.
That pattern strongly suggests a premeditated and persistent effort to assassinate him. The repeated attempts just underscored the determination of whoever was behind the operation.
And the suspects themselves, Andrey Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun. Well, the levels of polonium they left behind were actually higher than those found on Litvinenko himself.
Which strongly indicated they were the ones directly handling the radioactive substance.
Exactly. And both men, it turned out, had backgrounds in Russian intelligence, Lugovoy in the KGB, and later as a bodyguard for a former Russian PM.
And Kovtun also with KGB connections. The pieces start fitting together, don't they?
They really do.
Their backgrounds within the Russian security apparatus certainly lend credence to the theory of state involvement.
Yeah.
These weren't just, random individuals acting independently.
No way. They had connections to the very system Litvinenko had turned against.
Precisely.
Now, here's a detail that is almost darkly humorous, if the consequences weren't so tragic. The way Lugovoy and Kovtun apparently handled this incredibly dangerous radioactive poison.
How so?
It was described as idiotic, verging on suicidal.
Really?
Yeah, they seemed completely oblivious to the risks of radioactive contamination. They left trails in their hotel rooms, reportedly used ordinary towels to clean up leaks,
Oh my God.
and even disposed of the polonium down bathroom sinks. It's hard to believe.
This apparent lack of awareness is truly astonishing. For individuals with alleged intelligence training, their handling of such a hazardous material was remarkably careless.
Right.
It raises questions about their operational briefing, or perhaps just a profound underestimation of the dangers involved. Maybe arrogance.
Maybe. You'd think anyone dealing with something this lethal would be taking extreme precautions. But leaving radioactive fingerprints all over London, it's almost surreal.
Completely.
Then there's the fundamental question. Where did this polonium-210 even come from? This isn't something you can, buy online.
Definitely not. Macroscopic amounts, the kind needed for this poisoning, are primarily produced in state-regulated nuclear reactors.
And at the time, Russia was the primary global producer of polonium-210.
The source of the polonium is such a crucial element here. Its production in specialized, state-controlled facilities strongly suggests that a non-state actor would face immense difficulty, probably impossible, obtaining it in such quantities.
Indeed. And the specific batch of polonium used to poison Litvinenko was eventually traced back.
They traced the batch. Where to?
To the Avangard facility in Sarov, Russia. This forensic link, confirmed by experts, further solidified suspicions of Russian state involvement.
The ability to trace the isotope to a specific production site provides compelling forensic evidence. It makes the denials of involvement increasingly difficult to sustain, you'd think.
You would think. So why choose polonium-210? What could have been the motivation behind selecting such a rare and, frankly, bizarre poison?
Well, one theory centers on its initial difficulty to detect, as we discussed. Standard Geiger counters won't easily pick it up externally.
Right. Stealthy at first.
And perhaps also the slow and agonizing nature of the death it inflicts could have been a deliberate choice.
A message?
A chilling message intended for other critics of the Kremlin. A way of saying, we can reach you anywhere, and you will suffer the consequences.
That theory definitely aligns with a broader pattern, doesn't it? Other suspicious deaths and poisonings targeting those critical of the Kremlin.
It does. The protracted suffering Litvinenko endured certainly garnered significant public attention, which might have been part of the goal.
And how did Russia respond to all of this? Unsurprisingly, they vehemently denied any involvement. And they refused to extradite Andrey Lugovoy to the UK, citing a provision in their constitution that prohibits the extradition of Russian citizens.
Right. But the European Court of Human Rights later intervened, didn't it?
It did, and ruled quite definitively that Russia was indeed responsible for Litvinenko's assassination.
That ECHR ruling represents a significant legal and diplomatic condemnation of Russia's actions. It reinforces the findings of the UK's own inquiry and establishes a formal judgment under international law.
The Litvinenko case, as you mentioned, also drew parallels with other unsettling events, other poisonings, suspicious deaths of Kremlin critics and defectors.
Yeah, Salisbury comes to mind later on.
Exactly. It certainly raised disturbing questions about a potential pattern of silencing dissent abroad.
These comparisons are hard to ignore. While each instance has its own unique details, the recurring theme of, let's say, politically motivated attacks against individuals who challenge the Kremlin is deeply concerning.
Now, before we continue, if you're finding this deep dive into the Litvinenko poisoning as gripping as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, do that.
So you don't miss any of our future explorations into other compelling stories here on Tell Me More.
Okay, so we've talked about the handler's carelessness, but what's also fascinating here is just the sheer audacity of using such a rare and ultimately traceable substance on foreign soil.
It really is bold.
It speaks volumes about the perceived impunity of those who orchestrated this act. Like they thought they wouldn't get caught or wouldn't face consequences even if they did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of unbelievable details, consider this. The barman at the Millennium Hotel.
One who served the tea.
Yeah, the one who served tea to Litvinenko and the 2 former KGB officers. He noticed something very strange while pouring.
What did he notice?
He described a distinct obstruction when he tried to set the teapot down. Almost like someone was deliberately creating a slight blockage, maybe holding it slightly.
Huh.
And then when he emptied the remaining tea later, he noticed it was an unusual yellow color and had a thick, almost gooey consistency.
Gooey tea. That doesn't sound right.
Not at all. And he actually scooped some of it out of the sink and threw it in the bin. He narrowly avoided potential exposure himself.
How?
Simply by not touching his mouth or eyes afterwards. Just basic hygiene saved him, potentially. It's a truly chilling near miss.
Wow. That anecdote just underscores the casual proximity of innocent bystanders to such a deliberate and deadly act. It highlights the potential for far wider contamination.
And the sheer recklessness involved in the operation.
Total recklessness.
It really does send shivers down your spine. A state-produced radioactive element used as a murder weapon in a major world city. It raises so many profound and unsettling questions.
About power, about silencing opposing voices.
And the extraordinary lengths some might go to achieve their aims.
Indeed. The Litvinenko case remains a landmark event. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who dare to challenge powerful regimes.
And the potential reach of state-sponsored violence across international borders. It's not just something in spy movies.
Sadly not.
So, as you continue to think about this case, consider this final point. The meticulous planning required to acquire and deploy polonium-210 stands in stark contrast to the almost comical carelessness of the individuals who handled it in London, leaving that trail of radiation in their wake.
It's a bizarre contradiction.
What does this bizarre combination of high-level orchestration and low-level, almost bungling execution tell us about the nature of this operation and the individuals involved? It's a chilling paradox to contemplate long after our deep dive concludes.